This is the Comics Alternative Kickstarter, Discovering Plaguers International. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Kickstarter. This is the weekly program where I talk with a creator or a creative team who is currently kickstarting a comics-related project, asking them about what they're doing, and then encouraging them to, in essence, sell their Kickstarter to our listening audience. And this week, I have the pleasure of talking with fellow North Carolinian Max Huffman. His Kickstarter project is Plaguers International. Max, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And you're in Carrboro, North Carolina, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so you're in the Triangle area. I'm located in Charlotte, and I think you were telling me in an earlier email you grew up in Chapel Hill.
That's right. Yeah, I was born and raised. I actually did a trip to my childhood home just to do this interview.
Wow. You know, that's what the Comics Alternative is all about, bringing people back home. So, well, it's good. And by the way, I should say that I didn't ask to interview you for the Kickstarter series because you were a North Carolina native. I saw your project. I thought it looked fascinating. And then I discovered that you're in Carrboro. So that was an extra added bonus.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, there's a serious state connection there.
Mm-hmm. So tell me and our listeners about Plaguers International.
Sure. Plaguers International is a comic I've been working on for almost 2 years now, which is kind of absurd for a 20-page project. But it started as just a goof on the UGK Outcast song International Players Anthem, and it mutated into a comic I'm really excited about. It's kind of, oh man, I have such a tough time talking about my work and this project in particular, because in the past, a lot of my comics have been kind of like joke delivery systems, and this one's very based in comedy and humor, but it's also kind of a love letter to the classic American floppy comic book, like weird stuff you'd find in a dollar bin.
The way you describe Plaguers International on the Kickstarter page is a combination of three genres: madcap, romp, slapdash genre pastiche, and relationship disaster. And you also say that some of it is even going to be unsafe for work.
Yeah, I mean, that's really just a panel or two of mild male nudity. But, yeah, it's kind of like a mashup of my, like, Jack Kirby Euro adventure influences and art comics. And there is, like, kind of a slice of life-ish element to a little bit of it. It's kind of tonally just all over the place.
And, you know, from the description on the Kickstarter page, your humor definitely comes through. You describe the plot this way: Swirving Wildley is and that's a name. Swirving Wildley is the newest member of the world's most beloved extranational paramilitary death squad. Movement Salon, another character, is the leader of a wasteland guerrilla junk cult. They have a long day.
Yeah. So that would be another example of me not being the best describer of my own work. But yeah, those are the two main characters. They both have real goofy names. Movement Salon was something I saw on the side of a building in New York, and I think a friend of mine said, that sounds like one of your names. And I said, it is, right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now, this is a comic. Did it originally appear on your website? And I should mention that your website, if people want to find out more about the kind of work that you do, and not only comics, but just illustration work, is maxhuffman.com. And that's one word, Max Huffman. Did this originally appear on your site? Or because I know that you have a sample page up.
Right. Yeah. I originally made Plaguers with the intention of getting it published or publishing it myself, as it turned out. But I serialized it page by page weekly in a experiment with Patreon, which I found to be non-optimal.
What, the Patreon platform for
the
what you were doing?
The platform itself, yeah.
Yeah. So now, do you have a Patreon campaign for your work in general, or just for that comic?
Yeah, no, I ended up, I discontinued my Patreon a month or two ago, just because it felt like I was paywalling myself and not delivering enough to people who very kindly, want to support you. It wasn't for me. And I know a lot of people are doing great stuff with Patreon, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you're able to deliver for your Kickstarter campaign, Plaguers International. So tell us a little bit about the various reward levels that you have.
Sure. I wanted to keep it simple. The comic book is the thing. So I didn't go after, crazy frills or reward tiers, no pins or patches, but there's a base level, which is the comic book itself. And then beyond that, there's a limited edition print that's 5x7, I think, and it's full color archival quality inkjet print. And then beyond that, there's a special thanks credit if you want. There's one $100 reward tier that gets you everything I've done recently and will do the rest of this year. But really, it's centered around just a comic book.
Mm-hmm. And we should mention that the basic level that you mentioned, the comic book, for a pledge of $4 or more, individuals can get a PDF of Plaguers International. And then for $8 or more, backers can get a physical copy of the comic.
That's right.
So with this kind of humorous genre mix-up, where did the idea come from? What's the genesis of Plaguers International?
Oh, man. It's an amalgamation of a bunch of bits that have been coming together. It's been a rumination on relationship disasters and trying to find my place in the world post-grad. There's none of this stuff comes through in the final work itself, of course, but it's the influence is there. I really couldn't tell you how it came together, but it did, and yeah.
Now, is this the first Kickstarter campaign you've done, or have you done others in the past?
No, I've got a little bit of a history with Kickstarter. When I was in college, at SVA in New York, the School of Visual Arts, I put together with some friends an anthology called The Weekly Annual. That was this giant unwieldy book. We made a silkscreen cover and inserts, and there were parts that were digitally printed and parts that were risograph, and we hand bound. It was 160 pages, and there were little zines inside of it that were stapled in. It was this huge mess of a thing, but it was a really fun project, and we funded that through Kickstarter. And then way before that, when I was in high school, I was doing a webcomic, and that somehow gained enough traction for me to crowdfund a new laptop. My laptop broke, And this was like the early days of Kickstarter. It had been around maybe not even a year. And I was like, hey, if you give me $5, I'll give you a custom sketch because my laptop is broken. And so that shakes out to, I don't know, it's like a $1,200 laptop. That shakes out to more sketches than a 16-year-old could conceivably even think of drawing, or this 16-year-old at least. So I left some people in the lurch there and felt really bad about it. And I tried to come back and address it, but I think with that project especially, I was kind of like this like novelty child cartoonist, and I think a lot of people went in with like the lemonade stand mentality of just helping a kid out, which was really nice.
Yeah, but your comic for this Kickstarter, Plaguers International, it's already created, right? It's already finished?
Yeah, it's all done, all colored. The only thing is I have a cover design that's in progress, but yeah, the whole thing's laid out and ready to go.
Okay, and I ask because, half jokingly, because you just said that with your very first Kickstarter project when you were 16, you didn't follow through with some people, and I didn't want our listeners to wonder, now is this Max guy going to not follow up on this?
Right. Well, I have the same concern. It's always been whenever I've thought of Kickstarter crowdfunding in the past, I have this experience to turn to and deter me. But really, it is experience. I know what I'm getting into, and I know what I can reasonably promise to people.
Mm-hmm. I will put sample images from Plaguers International up in the show notes, but just for our listeners at this moment, before they look at the show notes, to kind of describe the kind of art that I see here on the page. I mean, this really strikes me as something that you would find, let's say, in an anthology collection that Fantagraphics would put out, or even drawn in Quarterly. It really does have that kind of alt indie feel to it. And so I'm curious who your, let's say, comics or cartoon inspirations are.
Right. Well, thanks so much. And you can say that a couple more times or add it to Fantagraphics.
Me and Gary Groth are just like this.
Oh, cool. So next time you see him, just drop a kind word. Yeah, my influences are all over the place. It's my touchstones for this one have been Bronze Age, like forgotten superhero comics. There's the Kirby thing is big, of course, and then there's the Euro contingent. Munoz and Sampaio, or Munoz really, or it's the huge Gary Panner, who I had the privilege of learning under at SVA. Memphis Group, and not cartoonists, but the whole comic is kind of like this Memphis Group hellscape. Yeah, those are the touchstones. I'm sure there's ones I'm forgetting, but Julie Doucet is huge for me.
Now, I mentioned earlier your website, maxhuffman.com. It's a good place for someone to learn even more about you in addition to what they see on the Kickstarter page. And I've looked through some of the comics that you have available for viewers. Tripsplain, Garage Island, Bootleg Jughead, Nouning Out, Musk Force, It's Karen. Are all of these the comics that you've created online? In other words, do you put everything that you do in terms of comics work on your site, or is this just a sampling?
That's most of it. It's definitely the stuff I'm okay with people seeing at this point. When I make work, I'm not thinking about putting it up on the website. I'm thinking about the weekly anthology, which we still do, or the zine I'm trying to get out. But yeah, getting it up, it's definitely nice to have there for people. I'm usually thinking about the comic book itself first, but it's hard in a town without a comic book shop or a comic scene.
There's not a comic shop in Carrboro?
Not anymore. No, we're kind of attached to at the hip with Chapel Hill. We used to have Chapel Hill Comics, which was a great store, great community. No longer there.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, getting back to the Kickstarter, as you and I record this, there are 11 days to go. Now, when this goes up, there'll be even fewer.
Yeah.
Your deadline for backing this Kickstarter project is Friday, February 23rd at 8:38 p.m. So as you're first listening to this, assuming that you're listening to this within, the first few days of its release on Saturday, you will have until this coming Friday at 8:38 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to back it. So go to Kickstarter and search for Plaguers International or Max Huffman, and then you can see the various reward levels that we've discussed. And again, to learn more about Max's work as a whole, go to maxhuffman.com. Max, thanks again for being on the Comics Alternative Kickstarter series.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we will be back next Saturday with another comics-related Kickstarter project. Until then, have a nice weekend.